Hello and welcome. Today let's talk about the reproductive system. When we go through the reproductive system, we'll take care of the male reproductive system first, and then we'll jump over to the female reproductive system. Now, when we talk reproductive system in general, I would like you to know organisms that carry out sexual reproduction must produce gametes. Okay? Organisms that are going to carry out sexual reproduction must produce gametes. Gametes are going to be haploid sex cells. They are haploid sex cells that we've talked about before when we talked about cell division and so forth. Now, these haploid sex cells, they are going to unite. So the male haploid sex cell and the female haploid sex cell, so the male haploid sex cell is a sperm and the female is the egg. When the sperm and the egg unite, we call that fertilization. So again, our haploid sex cells will unite during fertilization. Unlike other systems, we'll see the reproductive system is going to be slumber until puberty hits. And it's not going to be involved in maintaining everyday homeostasis. Also, I'd like you to know all other organ systems in the male and the female are going to be the same. The heart, our heart and a female heart is the same. The size may vary a little bit. Our lungs, the female lungs. We'll see all organ systems are going to be the same in males and females. Now, when we talk about the reproductive system, we'll see the reproductive system is going to be quite different in both sexes. It's going to be quite different in both sexes. We'll go over the male reproductive system first, and then we'll check out the female reproductive system next. So let's go through and let's check out the male reproductive system. Now, when we talk about the male reproductive system, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump a little forward, and I'm going to jump over to this picture here. Here we can appreciate some of those parts very well. Here we can see first we've got the external genitalia. We can appreciate the penis. And then we've got the scrotum. And inside the scrotum you can see is going to be the testes. Okay, and here we have some glands that we'll go through and we'll talk about. And right up in here is the bladder. And then at the posterior aspect here, you can appreciate the rectum and then the anus, which are a part of the gastrointestinal system that we have talked about. So here we've got one table I'd like you to see. Here, this table is going to go through all the different parts that we're going to go through, we're going to check out. So we'll look at the penis. The penis is going to be the organ for sexual intercourse. And then here we can appreciate the bulbourethral gland, the prostate gland, and then the seminal vesicles. And they're all going to be contributing basically nutrients and fluid to semen. So you can see here, contributing basic fluid to semen, the prostate gland, and then contributing viscous fluid to semen, the bulbourethral glands. And we'll look at the urethra there as well. We've talked about the urethra before in relation to the urinary system. And here, not only is it conducting urine we saw in the urinary system, but we said during ejaculation, it'll conduct sperm. Next then we have our vas deferens. It conducts sperm. Epididymis is going to store sperm while it matures. And then we talk testes. Testes are going to actually be producing the sperm. So let's go through and let's look at all of this stuff first. So here you can appreciate again, we've got let's move over to this picture here. So here we've got the penis, and running at the center of the penis, you've got the urethra. You've got the urethra right here in the center. Okay? And here you can see the urethra is going to be bringing down urine. I described to you guys before as the male having a single donut-shaped prostate gland right where that urethra emerges from the bladder, and you can see that there very nicely. And then here we can see this is going to be the reproductive system. The reproductive system you can see is going to tie into the male urinary system. We said we don't have that in the female. In the female, these two systems are separate. This system is going to basically open up right in here. So this female you're going to see is going to have three openings. One, reproductive, two, and then urinary is going to be the third. So here we can see we've got the penis. Now we look at the penis in greater detail. You can see here we've got the erectile tissue. And then right at the center is the urethra. So surrounding the urethra, you can say there as well. And if we were to move over to this picture right in here, you can appreciate the erectile tissue in greater detail. And then we can check this out right over here as well. So here we can appreciate now what's happened here. Here's basically the glans penis, or the head of the penis, we can also refer to it as. So here now you've got the foreskin. So here what's happening is you've got the shaft of the penis. The shaft of the penis has been opened up. Now they've taken the connective tissue layers off, and beneath the connective tissue layers you can appreciate the erectile tissue. And we can see the same thing right inside of here. Here's all the skin and connective tissue. And then beneath there, here we can appreciate the erectile tissue, all underneath that skin and connective tissue. So here what they've done is they've done like a cross section right through the penis. And here you can appreciate there's the urethra. And then here we've got arteries. And here we've got more arteries, and then a vein, and then some nerves there as well. So moving back then, we've got the penis there taken care of. Let's move to this picture. After the penis, then we've got the urethra, the erectile tissue. Next, then here we can appreciate we've got the testes. The testes, they're going to be found located, we said, within the scrotum. So they're here within the scrotum. And here you can see the testes have this structure right back in here. This is called the epididymis. So right inside of here is where sperm production will occur. And then right inside of here is where sperm storage occurs until it matures. And then, so this is the epididymis. And then here we can see we've got the vas deferens. The vas deferens now is responsible, we said, for conducting sperm. It'll conduct sperm from the epididymis all the way we're going to see into the ejaculatory duct, which is going to hook up to the urethra and help expel all of these contents of sperm plus these contents from these glands here into then that urethra. And here's the seminal vesicles. Here's one of them. There's two of them we have where they're found as a pair. One prostate gland, just one prostate gland, and we have two bulbourethral glands. We have two bulbourethral glands. All right, so bladder we can appreciate here. So here's that pubic symphysis basically right back in here. And then you can see the bladder is right behind it. And then when males have their tubes tied, or we can say they have a vasectomy, basically this is what happens. The vas deferens is what's going to get blocked off. So we try to block off this pathway so no sperm can make its way up. So here you can see that. And when we talk scrotum, the function of the scrotum we'll see is going to be to provide the testes with an environment that's going to be cooler compared to that of the body. Okay, so they have the ability to move up towards the body and move closer to the body if the ambient temperature is cold. Now the testes, they will also originate in the abdominal cavity, and then they descend down into the scrotum. And if they fail to descend down into the scrotum, medical attention is usually required there. So prostate gland we can appreciate here, and you should be able to understand now prostate gland is contributing secretions, the seminal vesicles are going to be contributing secretions, and then the bulbourethral glands also contributing secretions, all that are going to help sperm. All that will help sperm, and which will all help to make up, we'll see, semen. Right? Sperm and semen, two different things. Also here with this gland, I want you to understand the prostate. When it becomes enlarged, why males have trouble urinating. Because you can see the urethra passes right through. So we have to get that gland under control, and that'll help alleviate the pressure off of that urethra and help that pathway to open up. All right, let's move back then. Let's talk about the genital tract. Now, when we talk about the genital tract, I'd like you to know sperm is going to be produced by the testes, as we mentioned. It will mature in the epididymis. When we talk maturing in the epididymis, you can see maturation is going to be involving the gaining of motility, The epididymis, as we saw, was a nice, tightly coiled duct system. It was a nice, tightly coiled duct system that's going to be found on the outside of the testes. And you can see that right inside of here, found on the outside of the testes, or on the dorsal aspect of the testes, we can say there as well. Sperm has to mature here. It has to mature here so that way it can swim to the egg and do its job. Now, from the epididymis, sperm is going to travel to the vas deferens. It's going to travel to the vas deferens, as we can see there. Each vas deferens is going to travel to the abdominal cavity. It'll travel to the abdominal cavity around the bladder. You can see around the bladder, and it's going to empty its contents into the ejaculatory duct. And it'll empty its contents into the ejaculatory duct, which we can see connects to the urethra. Now, during ejaculation, sperm is going to leave the penis then. Sperm is going to leave the penis mixed in a fluid that's called semen. Like we said, sperm and semen are two different things. The three glands that we've mentioned and we talked about, those three glands, they're going to help make semen. Semen is going to be sperm plus secretions from those glands. That's what semen is. The pair of seminal vesicles, which you can see are going to be found lying at the base of the bladder, are going to join the vas deferens. They join the vas deferens, emptying into the ejaculatory duct. Next then is the prostate gland. This again is a donut-shaped gland, and it's going to be found surrounding the upper part of the urethra. The part that's found just beneath the urinary bladder. Finally, you're going to be able to appreciate then the bulbourethral glands. They're also known as cowpers. Glands. These are going to be pea-sized glands, and they're going to be found beneath the prostate on both sides of the urethra. Now, when we talk semen is going to have a basic pH. It has a basic pH. Swimming sperm, we'll see, are going to require energy. And semen contains this energy. And the energy is going to be found in the form of sugar, more specifically speaking, the sugar fructose. This sugar fructose is going to provide the energy required by this swimming sperm. And last, we'll see sperm is going to contain prostaglandins. And these prostaglandins are going to allow for contraction of that urethra to occur to help expel that semen. Next in here we can see the penis is going to be the male organ of sexual intercourse. It's going to be the male organ for sexual intercourse. The penis is going to have an enlarged tip region that's going to be called the glans penis. This region can be covered by a layer of skin that is called foreskin. Then we have the surgical procedure. It's called circumcision. Circumcision is the removal of the foreskin via surgery. All right, next then, here we can see we've gone through all these different parts. So we've checked them out here as well. So here you can appreciate the inside of the testes now in greater detail. You can see the inside of the testes. We've got all these different tubules in here. These tubules are the actual sperm producing factories. So sperm gets produced in here again. It's going to get sent off to the epididymis. You see right inside of here where it'll mature. And then we said here you can see the pathway sperm will take to make its way into the ejaculatory duct and eventually into the urethra. So here you can see again how the seminal vesicles and the vas deferens open up into one another and then eventually into the urethra, which you can see is surrounded by the prostate gland. And then you can see you've got the two Cowper's glands just beneath that. And then here you can appreciate the rest of the urethra surrounded by the erectile tissue or the shaft of the penis. And here we've got the glands or the enlarged tip or the head of the penis. All right, next then here we can appreciate, so make sure you've got all the functions down. Testes, they produce sperm and sex hormones. The epididymis, ducts where sperm will mature and they're going to be stored. And then the vas deferens is going to conduct sperm. And then the seminal vesicles, prostate, we said, and then the bulbourethra we talked about there, and then urethra and the penis. So let's talk about then erection. Let's talk about erection and orgasm in males. Now, when a male is sexually excited, the arteries in the penis, we can see right inside of here, the arteries in the penis are going to relax and they will widen. This is going to lead to an increase in blood flow, which will then cause the penis to enlarge and become erect. The veins that take blood away from the penis, they're going to be compressed by the enlarging erectile tissue. And what this does is it's going to trap the blood inside the veins. So all this blood inside the penis is going to cause the penis to enlarge and become erect. And then during ejaculation, we can see here, during ejaculation, sperm is going to enter the urethra from the vas deferens we saw. And the accessory glands contribute also to making up semen. I want you to know a sphincter is going to close off the urinary bladder. A sphincter will close off the urinary bladder so that way no urine is going to make its way into the urethra and no semen can enter up into the bladder. The urethra is going to carry sperm and urine at different times. Rhythmic muscle contractions are going to help semen to be expelled from the penis, as we mentioned, thanks to the prostaglandins. Up to 400 million sperm can be expelled during ejaculation. Next, then, let's look at the male gonads, or the testes, in greater detail. Now, when we talk about the male gonads and the testes, again, we'll revisit the testes we've talked about before. So as we said before, the testes, they're going to produce sperm and male sex hormones. They're going to be found lying outside the abdominal cavity within a sac-like scrotum. The testes, they develop in the abdominal cavity, as I mentioned before, but then they descend into the scrotum to finish development. Now, if the testes fail to descend, this can lead to infertility. The testes ascend and they descend for optimal temperature, as we mentioned before as well. Now, when we go into the testes and we look inside the testes, we said we're going to have a whole bunch of tubules. The testes, you can see, are going to be composed of compartments that are called lobules. And then within each of these lobules, we're going to see 1 to 3 tightly coiled seminiferous tubules. Altogether, these tubules have a combined length of about 250 meters. And then we talk spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis, you'll see, is going to occur in the seminiferous tubules, as we'll see microscopically. Right inside of here. So moving back. Now when we talk our seminiferous tubules, again the testes are divided up into lobules. Each contains a few seminiferous tubules. Each of these tubules then is going to be packed with cells that are undergoing spermatogenesis, which is the production of sperm. Now, each of the spermatogonia are going to undergo meiosis 1, and then they will undergo meiosis 2 to eventually produce 4 spermatid that are going to be haploid cells. That will all be haploid cells. Again, cells that contain half the genetic information. Now, spermatid, they're going to differentiate into sperm. They will differentiate into sperm. Also here, we're going to have Sertoli cells. These Sertoli cells, they're going to be responsible for supporting, nourishing, and regulating spermatogenic cells. Mature sperm, we'll see, are going to have 3 main parts to them. Mature sperm are going to have 3 main parts to them. A head, you can see right inside of here. And the head has acrosome. Acrosome is going to contain enzymes that are going to be needed to penetrate an egg. Next, then we have the middle piece. In the middle piece, then we're going to have many mitochondria. And those mitochondria are going to provide energy for movement. And then last, we can appreciate the tail. The tail is structured like a flagellum. And looking back at the head is also going to contain the nucleus. It's also going to contain genetic information, the nucleus. So the acrosome, we said, is going to help that sperm to penetrate that egg. Sperm, I'd like you to know, are not going to live longer than 48 hours in the female reproductive tract. They will not live longer than 48 hours. So let's move down then to the hormonal regulation in males. Let's talk about the hormonal regulation. Before we do that, let's make sure we've got everything here taken care of. So we'll take interstitial cells and get those taken care of in a second. So spermatogenesis, spermatogonia we talked about. So here we can appreciate the testes then in greater detail. So here you can see we've got the epididymis coiled about the outside. And here we've got the vas deferens making its way up. And then here inside, you can appreciate the lobules. Here's a lobule, another lobule, another lobule, another lobule, another lobule, another lobule. And each of these lobules have these seminiferous tubules. So if we were to get this seminiferous tubule and make a cut through it and open it up and look at it like we're doing right inside of here, this is what that would look like. Right inside of here, you can see. We'd see so many tubules in there. We cut one of those tubules. This is what the inside is going to look like. So right inside of here, we're going to see are all those spermatogenic cells. And eventually, the cell, as it's undergoing growth, it's going to make its way to the lumen. And here we can see at the lumen, we've got all these tails you can appreciate here, and then the rest of the sperm that are ready to detach and then swim in the lumen, and they're making their way up into the epididymis. And here we can see a simple schematic that's depicting to us basically exactly what's going on. So here we can see we've got spermatogonia undergoing mitosis to form two primary spermatocytes. Now one of these cells we can see is going to go back and become the spermatogonia again. It'll become a diploid cell. The other cell now we can see is going to continue through meiosis. It goes through meiosis 1, producing 2 daughter cells. Those cells then enter meiosis 2, producing 4 daughter cells, and those cells then eventually mature into 4 sperm. And here you can see those sperm. And here we can see the immature sperm will make their way into the epididymis, where then they will mature and then take off into the vas deferens as soon as ejaculation occurs. All right, so then when we talk about the hormonal control, the hypothalamus we can see is going to secrete GnRH. GnRH stands for gonadotropin releasing hormone. GnRH then is going to stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to secrete gonadotropic hormones. The gonadotropic hormones we can see are FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. So again, GnRH is going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to release gonadotropic hormones, LH and FSH, in both males and in females. Now in males, FSH is going to stimulate the production of sperm in the seminiferous tubules. Also released here is inhibin. Inhibin is going to inhibit, just like its name says, it inhibits further FSH synthesis. LH, or luteinizing hormone in males, is going to control the production of testosterone by the interstitial cells. Testosterone is going to be the main sex hormone in males, and it's essential for the normal development and function of the male tract. Testosterone is also going to help give males some characteristics that are going to set them apart from the female. Very important hormones, GnRH, LH, and FSH. So let's go back and make sure we've got everything here taken care of. So testosterone, here you can see I want you to go through and make sure you've got everything down here in relation to testosterone. Very important sex hormone here in males. Next in here, GnRH, LH, FSH we talked about. Okay, awesome. Make sure you got that negative feedback down, and then inhibin as well. And then we talked interstitial cells. They're going to be responsible for secreting hormones, more importantly, androgens. And these cells, then we can see, are going to be found lying in between the seminiferous tubules. So coming back here, they'll be in between these seminiferous tubules. Right here, you can see, right inside of here, we can see some interstitial cells. Okay, so in between those tubules. And then moving back here, we can see the nurse cells or the Sertoli cells. You can see right next to the spermatogonia and then the developing sperm. All right. Next, then let's move over to female reproductive system. Let's talk female reproductive system. Now, when we talk about the female reproductive system, we can see here first the female gonads, they're going to be the paired ovaries. In the male, we had the paired testes. Oogenesis here is going to be the production of an egg or an oocyte. In the males, we saw spermatogenesis. Now, here's another term I'd like you to know about. This is ovulation. Ovulation, we'll see, is going to be the process by which an oocyte is going to burst from an ovary. It bursts from the ovary, and it's going to enter into the uterine tubes, the fallopian tubes, or the oviducts, we can also refer to them as. Now, when we talk about the genital tract, here we'll see it has 4 different parts. You're going to have the uterine tubes, the uterus, the cervix, and the vagina. So let's actually go over these female reproductive organs and let's check them out. So here in this picture, we can appreciate first, we've got the rectum, which leads to the anus, right? That's all a part of the digestive tract. And then here anteriorly, we can appreciate the bladder. And then here we have the urethra. Again, look, it's a separate pathway. In the male, these 2 pathways were combined. So here we have the reproductive pathway. So in the female, you can see you've got 3 openings here. You've got one from the bladder, that's for the urethra, one for the vagina, and then one here you can see is the anus. In the male, we had just 2 openings because the reproductive and urinary systems were intertwined. Now here you can appreciate then, first we've got the vagina. The vagina is going to lead us to then the uterus, which you can see here. And then here we've got the cervix of the uterus. And then the cervix leads us to the rest of the uterus, which then is going to lead us, you can see, to the fallopian tubes, which then take us to the ovaries, the gonads here. Now, again, this is one view. Here we can appreciate another view. So here we've got the vagina, and here we've got the cervix of the uterus leading us into the rest of the uterus. And then here you can see the fallopian tubes on the sides. And here the fallopian tubes, you can see, are going to be responsible for receiving the egg. So here you can see ovulation take place. The egg is being expelled out of the ovaries and into then the fallopian tubes. So here's a closed view of everything on this side. And then here, this side, they've actually opened it up so you can appreciate what the inside looks like. So we've got the ovaries. They produce the oocyte and sex hormones, just like we saw with the testes. The uterine tubes, or we can call them the oviducts or the fallopian tubes, they're going to conduct the oocyte. So that's like the vas deferens you can think of in the male. And this is also going to serve as the location of fertilization. And then the uterus, the womb, we can also refer to it as, it's going to house the developing fetus. And then the cervix, it's going to contain the opening to the uterus. And we talk vagina, we'll talk more about it when we get into there, and then the rest of these organs as well. It'll receive the penis during sexual intercourse, and it's going to serve as a birth canal and as an exit for menstrual flow. So let's go through the genital tract then, and let's check out this female reproductive system. Now, when we talk genital tract, I'd like you to know first you have the uterine tubes, or we said we can call them the fallopian tubes or the oviducts. and they're going to extend from the uterus to the ovaries. They extend from the uterus over to the ovaries. However, I'd like you to know, and I'd like you to take note, the uterine tubes, they are not attached to the ovaries. They are not attached to the ovaries. Instead, we can see they have these finger-like projections that are called fimbriae. And these fimbriae are found sweeping over the ovaries. So it's kind of like this. There's not going to be actual contact between the two. You can see these fimbriae of the fallopian tubes, they're going to be sweeping basically over those ovaries. They're responsible for bringing in those oocytes. So you can see when the oocyte is expelled, that oocyte is going to be swept up into the uterine tubes. When it's expelled from the ovary, it gets swept up into the fallopian tubes, into the uterine tubes. Now from there, the oocyte is going to be pushed slowly towards the uterus. From there, you can see it's going to be slowly pushed towards the uterus. An oocyte lives only around 6 to 24 hours unless fertilization occurs. Fertilization and the formation of a zygote are going to take place inside the uterine tubes, inside the fallopian tubes. Fertilization, we'll see, is going to be the process where the sperm and the egg are going to unite. The developing embryo, then we'll see, is going to arrive at the uterus. Fertilization, we'll see, is going to take place inside this uterine tube. Then what's going to happen is the developing embryo now. It's a developing embryo. We'll see it will arrive at the uterus. It will arrive at the uterus after several days, and then it's going to implant itself into the uterine lining, which we'll see is going to have been preparing for that implantation. Now, if that embryo implants itself in this uterine tube or elsewhere, it results in ectopic pregnancy. It results in an ectopic pregnancy. And we have to go in and we have to remove it. So we don't have that fallopian tube burst. If it bursts, we can't go in and put it together. Then this patient's going to be left with then just one fallopian tube. The uterus, then we can see, is the next organ. When we talk about the uterus is going to be a thick wall. You can see that here very well. It's a thick-walled muscular organ about the size and the shape of an inverted pear. About the size and the shape of an inverted pear. Now the oviducts, they join this uterus at its upper end. We can see here the fallopian tubes join that uterus at its upper end, while at its lower end, we have the cervix. The cervix is going to connect with the vagina. It connects with the vagina. Development of the embryo usually takes place in the uterus. The lining of this uterus we see inside of here, the lining of this uterus is called the endometrium. The endometrium. And then the muscular layer we see in here is called the myometrium. The myometrium. And then last here on the outside, we can appreciate the perimetrium. So endometrium, myometrium, and then perimetrium here on the outside. So peri, myo, and then endo. This endometrium, it's going to help to form the placenta. It helps to form the placenta, which is going to be responsible for supplying nutrients for fetal and embryonic development. In non-pregnant females, we'll see this endometrial lining we have right inside of here. Its thickness is going to vary according to a monthly cycle that's going to be called the uterine cycle. The cervix, we can see here, is going to lead us to the vaginal canal. It leads us to the vaginal canal. Now, when we talk about the vagina, we can see the vagina is a tube. It's a tube, and we said it's going to serve as the birth canal. So you can see the baby is going to be inside of here, and it's going to be expelled out through here if we have vaginal delivery. If we have a C-section, then what happens is this uterus gets cut, and then the baby is expelled out from there. So, so usually speaking, we can see the vagina is a tube, and it's going to serve as the birth canal. And it facilitates sexual intercourse as it receives the penis. And we also said it's going to act as the exit for menstrual flow. So inside of here, this endometrial lining, it'll be shed. And once it sheds, you can see it's going to make its way out through the cervix, and it's going to be sent out through the vagina and basically expelled out from the body. So let's talk external genitals. The external genitals are collectively known as the vulva. They're collectively known as the vulva. And this will include the two large hair-covered folds of skin that are called the labia majora. And then next we have our labia minora. The labia minora are going to be two small folds that are going to be found just inside the labia majora. Next, then we have the glans clitoris. This is going to be the external portion of the clitoris. This is the organ of sexual arousal in females. It too becomes engorged with blood during sexual stimulation. The vagina may be closed by a tissue that's called the hymen. So here we can appreciate the vulva, and then the hymen would be basically found covering the vagina right inside of here. It's an incomplete partition that may be found closing the entrance into the vagina. And then again, here we can appreciate the anus, and here we've got the vaginal opening, and then right inside of here you have the urethra. So 1, 2, and 3 openings. Labia majora, labia minora, then again the opening, and here we have the glans clitoris. All right, next then let's talk about the ovarian and uterine cycles. Now, when we talk about the ovarian and the uterine cycles, here I'd like you to know hormone levels are going to cycle in the female monthly, and the ovarian cycle drives the uterine cycle. Now, when we talk ovarian and uterine cycles, what we'll do is we'll talk about the ovarian cycle first, and then we'll go through the uterine cycle towards the end. And here we'll see hormone levels are going to cycle in the female monthly, and the ovarian cycle will drive the uterine cycle. So let's go through and let's look at the ovarian cycle first. Now, first when we talk ovarian cycle, let's discuss the ovaries. Now, the ovaries are going to be made up of an outer cortex and an inner medulla. They're going to be made up of an outer cortex and an inner medulla. Now, in the cortex is where you will find the follicles. So the follicles are going to be found in the cortex. Each follicle is going to contain an oocyte in different stages. So again, each follicle we'll see is going to contain an oocyte. Okay, that's going to be the egg. The actual egg within the follicle will be the oocyte. So the whole thing with the egg is a follicle. So here we'll see each follicle is going to contain an oocyte in different stages. I want you to know a female is going to be born with all the ovarian follicles that she will ever have. She's going to have about 700,000 follicles. Now, out of these 700,000, we'll see only about 400 follicles will ever mature. As a female usually produces one oocyte per month during her reproductive years, which are going to be after puberty hits, right, until menopause. We'll see oocytes are going to age as a female ages as well, because they're going to be present at birth. Next in here we can see the ovarian cycle is going to occur as a follicle changes from primary to secondary and eventually to a vesicular, or what we can call a Graafian follicle. Now, we'll see here in this figure, we can kind of look at that as well. We can see the stages of this follicle maturing, and we can see the same thing here. We can see here, as a follicle matures, oogenesis is initiated and it continues. The primary oocyte is going to divide, producing two haploid cells. One of these haploid cells is going to be the secondary oocyte, which we can see right inside of here very well. And the other is going to be the first polar body. And the other will be the first polar body. During ovulation, we'll see the vesicular follicle is going to burst. When it bursts, it's going to release the secondary oocyte we see right inside of here. Then once the vesicular follicle loses its secondary oocyte, we'll see it's going to become the corpus luteum. So here you can see that now very well. So here we can see we've got our primary follicles. They go on to become secondary follicles, which will then become a vesicular or a Graafian follicle, we said. Then this vesicular follicle, we can see will continue to mature, and eventually you can see we have ovulation take place. Now, ovulation, you've got the secondary oocyte being released. That first polar body that we produced here, it's no good. It's no good. So you're going to see a difference here between oogenesis and spermatogenesis. Now, when we compare oogenesis to spermatogenesis, if you recall, we're not going to have 4 functional cells here in oogenesis being produced. We're only going to have 1. In the male, though, we had 4 functional sperm that are produced. So here, this first polar body that we have produced is basically no good. You can see it's got no cytoplasm. It doesn't have any of the components that it's going to require. All of those go to the secondary oocyte. Now here we can see once this follicle undergoes ovulation and the secondary oocyte is ejected, the secondary oocyte is going to make its way then into the fallopian tubes. Makes its way into the fallopian tubes. Now when this secondary oocyte is inside the fallopian tubes, it's going to be passing through those fallopian tubes, making its way through. Now if a sperm happens to be there, if a sperm is there and it enters, then this cell is going to complete meiosis II. Then it will complete meiosis II. So you can see here the sperm, if it comes in, if it's available, if it's in the picture, then this is going to be completing meiosis II, the cell will. If no sperm is present, then this egg is going to be basically leaving the body along with menstrual flow. Now, if it completes meiosis II, you can see here what's going to happen. This secondary oocyte is going to produce then a second polar body. So it produces a second polar body and a zygote. The zygote we can see is going to have 46 chromosomes and eventually form the fetus. But the secondary polar body is going to be of no good. This is the only functional cell that's basically produced. So let's go back then and let's check out then the phases of the ovarian cycle. So when we talk about the phases of the ovarian cycle, I want you to know that the ovarian cycle is going to be divided into 2 phases. It's going to be divided into 2 phases. The first half of the cycle is going to be called the follicular phase. And then when we talk about the second phase is going to be called the luteal phase. It'll be called the luteal phase. Now, during the follicular phase, FSH, it's going to promote the development and the maturation of the follicle in the ovary. It promotes the maturation and the development of a follicle in the ovary, which then secretes estrogen and progesterone. So here during this phase, we can see the ovaries are going to secrete estrogen and progesterone. As the estrogen levels rise, it's going to exert negative feedback onto the anterior pituitary's secretion of FSH, saying, all right, we don't need any more. Then you can see the follicular phase will come to an end. Next, then we're going to have, so here we can see LH promotes the corpus luteum's development, which is going to secrete progesterone and some estrogen. So here we can appreciate that corpus luteum as well. Now here, once this follicle ejects the oocyte, you can see we've got now the corpus luteum formed. This corpus luteum is going to produce the sex hormones, progesterone, and some estrogen, as we just mentioned. So coming back here, so here then we can see as blood progesterone levels rise, It's going to exert feedback control over the anterior pituitary secretion of LH. Now the corpus luteum then begins to degenerate. The low progesterone and estrogen levels are going to cause menstruation then to begin. So this will take us to the uterine cycle. The uterine cycle is going to be affected by the female sex hormones estrogen and progesterone. One of their functions is going to be to affect the endometrium, causing the uterus to undergo cyclic changes or cyclic series of events that we're going to call the uterine cycle. It's going to be a 28-day cycle, and it's going to be divided, we'll see, as follows. It's not always a 28-day cycle. This is just for textbook illustration. Okay, so when we talk days 1 through 5, you'll see during days 1 through 5, a low level of female sex hormones in the body are going to cause the endometrium to disintegrate. They're going to cause the endometrium to disintegrate and its blood vessels to rupture. So we'll see on day 1 of the cycle, blood and tissue is going to pass out of the vagina during menstruation. Now, when we talk days 6 through 13, we'll see increased production of estrogen by a new ovarian cycle in the ovary causes the endometrium to thicken and become vesicular and glandular. So having vesicles and glands there. This is called the proliferative phase. And this we'll see is going to be called the proliferative phase. And then we have day 14. On day 14, ovulation usually occurs. We'll see the ovaries, they usually alternate in producing one oocyte a month. So day 14, ovulation occurs. Then we have days 15 through 28. Here we'll see the increased progesterone is going to cause the endometrium to double or triple its thickness. And this we'll see is going to be called the secondary phase. This will be called the secondary phase. The endometrium is now ready or prepared to receive the developing embryo. Now, if this doesn't occur, the low levels of female sex hormones are going to result in the endometrium breaking down and causing menstruation to occur, as we can see right inside of here. Next, when we talk estrogen and progesterone, both are going to have effects other than those in the ovarian and the uterine cycles. Estrogen, we can see, is going to maintain female secondary sex characteristics, such as breast development, axillary and pubic hair development, and subcutaneous fat deposition, kind of like what testosterone did in the male, also causing a wider pelvis to be formed. Progesterone, you'll see, is also going to be needed for breast development. So here we can see, we looked at the ovarian cycle, and then we checked out this here as well. And here now when we talk hypothalamic control, we can see here the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary, and the ovaries are all going to function to control female hormone levels. Just like we saw in the male, we're going to have GnRH being released, as we've seen and we've talked about, and then it's going to promote the release of FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary. Now here we can see FSH, it promotes the development and the maturation of the follicle in the ovary, and LH, we said, is going to promote the production of the corpus luteum. So here now we can appreciate both of the cycles together. So here we can see FSH levels are increased, and as we said, it's going to promote the development of this follicle. And then eventually you can see those FSH levels are going to start to decrease. And here what happens is LH levels increase. And then here near ovulation, you can see LH levels and FSH levels will both increase. This then we can see leads to ovulation. And then here we've got the ejection of the oocyte. And then we've got both FSH and LH both coming back down. But here we've got LH still increased, again involved with this corpus luteum. Eventually that corpus luteum is going to degenerate, and then you can see LH levels will come down. And then what's going to happen is FSH levels will start to increase again. And then FSH, we said, is going to be involved in promoting the development and the maturation of the follicle in the ovary. Here now we can associate estrogen and progesterone to the thickness. Here now we can associate estrogen and progesterone to the thickness of the uterus now. So here first we can see during menstruation, both estrogen and progesterone are going to be found at stable levels. Eventually then here in the proliferative phase, we can see estrogen is going to start to increase. As the proliferative phase is going to come to an end and ovulation occurs. Now, once ovulation occurs, you can see estrogen levels are going to start to decrease. They decrease and progesterone levels increase. Now, here you can see at the same time, we've got a nice thick endometrium here formed. Along with that, it's got a lot of blood vessels, and we said it's quite glandular. So here then, when we enter the secretory phase, now if the sperm is present and if fertilization occurs, you can see that zygote, when it implants, it's going to be served with a lot of vascularity. And you can see progesterone levels are increased compared to estrogen levels. Eventually, estrogen levels you can see coming right back up, and then progesterone levels coming down if fertilization didn't take place. So if it doesn't take place, what's going to happen is we're going to lead to then menstruation. And this uterine cycle will continue over and over again. So here we can appreciate the ovarian cycle. And then down here we've got the uterine cycle and everything now together. So here we can see now as menstruation is taking place and the proliferative phase is occurring, we've got follicles developing, and one of them are getting ready for ovulation, which is going to happen around day 14. So here you can see now all of those events in relation to each of the hormone levels as well. So you can see after ovulation, each of these hormones come down except for progesterone. Progesterone levels will start to increase. So here we can appreciate the ovarian cycle and all the events taking place in relation to certain hormones. And the same thing happening down here in the uterus and the uterine cycle, and again in relation to hormones down here as well. So here we've got a nice table depicting to us all the events taking place in both the ovarian cycle and then also the uterine cycle.